Hey, John Gilroy here. Today, we're going to take a look at penetration testing and ethical hacking for the federal government. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I'll be your moderator in the virtual studio. Today is Trey Ford, Chief Strategy and Trust Officer of a company called Bugcrowd. Trey, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
I typed in your company name in Google this morning, and up comes FedRep Moderate certification from CISA. Hey, put that on a T-shirt or something, huh?
Oh, it's a big deal. You know, this is several years of work across the organization, and we've got a great partnership with CISA. Grateful for that partnership, but more excited to be able to partner and serve the mission with the government.
Yeah, and I've done enough of these interviews to know that, there's different agencies that maybe, not as strong, but this is CISA. So, yeah, we're going to partner with these guys. So there must be, the big word here is trust involved. So there's got to be trust involved between you and CISA. So what did you do to earn that trust, Trey?
This is missional. I think ultimately we're all trying to make the digital ecosystem safer, and part of that is sunshine. Relationships are based on trust and communication. What we're trying to bring forward is the opportunity to identify, communicate, make it safe to share information about vulnerabilities and to get them addressed. The existence of vulnerabilities is not really the issue. The question is, do we have a clean path to get those addressed and closed up? And so that partnership, we've got one with CISA, we work with DHS, the Pentagon. There's a number of folks out there, and Binding Operational Directive 2001 is facilitating and requiring that type of communication to drive public trust.
I've worked with software developers for many years. I have friends, and we get coffee and we talk. And I'm sure if I said, well, how would you find vulnerabilities? Well, you can get a penetration test. You can get ethical hacking. You can scan, and they'll give you 5 or 6 different ways to do it. And each one has a strength and a weakness. And so when you look for vulnerability testing and hidden vulnerabilities, where do you start?
That's a great question. And I think it's important to call out that the only way to measure the effectiveness of your developer training, of your developer tool stack and their environment, the integration testing process, is to see your applications and your services, what's exposed to the internet, through the eyes of the attacker. And so offensive testing is ultimately how to do that, whether that is through a penetration test, a vulnerability scan, or through bug bounties and vulnerability disclosure programs. What we're trying to do is facilitate a safe way to identify those vulnerabilities and to communicate them over so we can address them together.
Way back 10 years ago, I think the Pentagon had, maybe you guys were behind this. There's some kind of a hack or penetration testing. What was that all about?
Well, the Pentagon has a massive estate, right? There's a lot of technology, right? There's massive surface area. So how do we facilitate, one, identifying it? It's more than simply scanning subnets. Number 2 is identifying what that attack surface is. And so the partnership, the diversity of perspective, the expertise from around the globe to perform that scanning, to do that discovery, and to facilitate a safe way to bring those conversations in is top of mind. That's what we do.
So people go to Bugcrowd and they'll contact you and go, hey, we have a federal mandate that we have to know what the vulnerability. In fact, we have to disclose the vulnerability policies. And so I think that's a key area where you can help my federal audiences, what they call VDIs. Is that correct?
VDP, that's right. Yeah, a vulnerability disclosure program. So I'll say post 9/11, if you recall, the notion of if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
I can't remember how the UK calls it. I think it's call it, sort it, something to this effect. The whole idea is if you see something, you've got to be able to tell someone that can do something about it, right? The common citizen is not in a position to patch software on behalf of the government. But if we see something, what is the safest way to bring that to their attention? And so the idea of a vulnerability disclosure program is there's three elements to this. First is a policy that creates safety for good faith research, bringing it forward. Second is a point of contact. Who do they contact? What is the established ingest point for us to bring those concerns? Most of us in the United States deal with a emergency 911 and then a non-emergency number. There has to be a safe place to bring those things forward. The last is a process. What do you do after you've received that? You have to build the organizational muscle that reflects what that process is to handle those things. And so the VDP services that we bring forward help streamline that entire process, deduplicate, so you're only going to be processing and handling validated vulnerabilities, actionable outcomes. And what we're driving is efficiency in that process.
Well, let's go back to the word you used earlier, trust. So I think trust is kind of an important concept for federal agencies, especially some more
Yes.
sensitive documents here.
That's right.
And so how do you manage and monitor your research community to ensure that it's a trustworthy community for testing?
That's a fair question. And I think it depends on the form in which we're speaking about testing. So applications that are not exposed to the general public, you're going to not be having the entire universe testing. So that usually gets done by red teaming or penetration testing. When we're talking about vulnerability disclosure programs, these are for software and services that are exposed to the internet that the general public can interact with. Now, rather than focusing on the who or the how, we're focused on the what. And more than anything, we want to create safety in the process for communicating that vulnerability. I don't care where in the world that vulnerability was found and brought to the US government. What I want to do is identify that vuln, maybe figure out if it's ever been touched before, but ultimately fix that to where we've increased resilience. And so I think that's distracting from what the mission is, and that's to identify and close vulnerabilities.
If you go to Google Trends and type in different words, you get these graphs and these curves and everything else. It's always fun to do.
That's right.
And I'm sure if you went over there and typed in authorization, you'd see it. But if you saw something like typed in continuous authorization, continuous monitoring, it's like, we can see the graph going up, but the degree of difficulty, it's almost, it's not it goes straight up. I mean, so how can a company like yours do continuous monitoring for organizations as large as some of the agencies you're talking about?
The magic there gets into automation and diversity of testers, right? So obviously automation is super important. A lot of our researchers build test harnesses that continuously scan across all of the targets in scope. Beyond that, what we're looking at is a follow the sun population of researchers, whether they're using agentic AI now, or if they've got their scripting and scanning harnesses running, or if we're talking about live humans around the globe working on various projects. Now, parts of the US government, some of the applications we're not going to be welcoming into the programs. There we have OFAC and other considerations, but for the open VDP programs, we're going to welcome that from anywhere. So the idea is that you're going to welcome that level of assessment from anywhere all the time, and we're facilitating that. So maximizing participation and engagement is what we're after.
I'm going to turn the tables here. This is Federal Tech Podcast, but I'm going to look at the people in Chicago and Tulsa and Austin and the commercial world. So let's turn the tables here. So what can your experience teach people in the private sector about vulnerability discovery?
What can we teach them about vulnerability discovery? Listen, if it's software, it's probably not completely secure. Nothing's perfect, and no matter what marketing tells you, nothing's perfect, right?
I know they're not going to believe that, but it's true.
Well, then that's the advertising, right? And if you think all the way back to, let's go back to the early days of PCI. Before it was PCI, there was QDSP from Visa. There was the STP from MasterCard. There were 5 different payment brands that brought forward what ultimately became PCI. The mission behind what PCI, the payment card industry data security standard, was to create consumer safety, consumer confidence. What we did not want to do was have people be afraid to use credit cards. What they drove was a level of transparency and accountability between the merchants, people receiving and handling credit card transactions, all the way back to the card providers. What we want to do is create that ecosystem. So what can we teach them about vulnerability discovery and handling is QA is really hard, and no one's surprised by that. But partnering with the most diverse, the most expert perspectives, there are people that are specialized in very strange, very esoteric, specialized bugs. You can't hire them all. You can't staff them all. You don't need them on all of your projects, but how do you get the right folks plugged in at the right time in the right place? And that's ultimately what we're looking to do, is enrich that web of perspective and engagement.
Well, Trey, this time of year, my son and a lot of people are looking at the NFL and who's going to draft who, and what about this free agent? Maybe Trey Ford can fit in as an offensive guard on the line, and everyone's looking for talent in the NFL, and everyone in the federal community is looking for tech talent, and I'm sure commercial companies are looking for technology talent too. And so, how do you put people on your team and get people with this? This is a very specific skill set to have. This isn't a plumbing skill set. This is pretty advanced skill set that you're looking for. How do you get these pen testers or, these ethical hackers?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple different populations or demographics that we're looking at. So first, what we're offering the federal sector is the opportunity to find the right people with the right skills, putting in the right effort at the right time, right? What we want to do is build that ecosystem. From the supply side, what we're delivering from the research side, we have folks that are full-time pen testers, and they're tired of hammering on Ruby applications. And so full-time pen testers get to test what their sales team sold. And so their sample buys and the population of things they get to toy with every day, that's not why they got into hacking. It's how they pay the bills. And so a lot of these folks, they moonlight on the side, and their company allows them to do that. So they get to do really fascinating research on targets of interest and opportunity. Some of these folks are computer scientists. We can laugh about nation states and what we call advanced persistent threats, but I would argue that the education sector probably has the most advanced persistent threat. We've got people that are not yet at the age of majority, right there. They have all the free time in the world, all the Red Bull, and all the computer science training, and very minimal consequences. And so the education population has very low capacity for testing and monitoring and defense, and a high supply of folks that are motivated to do hacking. There's another population of folks that are at the latter years of their career that have massive historical memory unsafe language development experience and understand computer science and networking that are discovering, wow, I can break applications and moonlight and maybe make more money moonlighting doing this than I did in my full-time job. There's a lot of folks with really great perspective and expertise that are entering the job force in the bug bounty universe that are doing tremendous work, and we want to on-ramp those folks too. So we're pulling talent from everywhere to do this work.
I'm just putting this in perspective. I'm thinking about 10, 15 years ago. You'd have to sign a contract on a rental building and get 3 or 4 floors and then physically bring people in, maybe fly people in and relocate. I mean, doing your job 15 years ago, we drive people crazy. It would be almost impossible to. Now today, you're in a position where you can leverage just the ability for remote people to take and access different. It's almost like it's a perfect storm for your company. It's a real nice storm because you can pull in some from Seattle or whatever. I don't know where. I mean, it's almost the right company for today.
Oh, it's perfect. I mean, when we think about this, so whether you're in Taylor, Texas, in small town East Texas, you don't have access to local SCIF. You're not going to a government facility.
No.
But the federal government now has access to on-demand elite talent. It removes the hiring complexity, the overhead for background checks and all the stuff because they're not building, they're not interacting, they're not even touching the data. They're simply performing testing. And the operational efficiency for getting the very best for a specific project on time with no overhead, it's a tremendous win for everybody involved.
That's the ROI. And that's, I think, the story here. Yes, you can accomplish an effective and reasonable amount of cost and get the bang for the buck, as they say. Let's talk about your FedRAMP experience again. Give me the journey of FedRAMP and how many sleepless nights did you have and how many years did it take your company to accomplish that feat?
It was a couple of years in the making. So there are companies that will tell you that we will get you FedRAMP in 90 days. And maybe that's possible if you're lifting your entire company and dropping in, if that's the vision, right? You're simply a SaaS company. We've had an interesting architecture where we have our infrastructure where we broker this relationship, we handle and triage the submissions, and we're providing information back to the research community on where to find targets. The neat shift that the federal government has achieved is the URL, for some purposes, has been considered federal data. The username and password to log into that is definitely federal data. But for the sake of these programs, what we have is a partnership that says, look, we're hunting vulnerabilities. We're going to give them targets and allow them to do this work. Because a lot of these federal civilian agencies have a lot of internet exposed surface area. How are they getting them tested? Pen tests are expensive. That's a once a year Christmas card picture of what it looks like. How do you get continuous coverage? And so what you're looking for is, one, a pay for results model, but number two, the ability to line these connections up. So our journey was across 2 years, and we had a great partner. We partnered with Coalfire to help get us organized. We did a pre-assessment. There's a whole bunch of things. There's FIPS 140 and a whole bunch of other things we've got to do. The NIST 853. There's all these different operational things we had to work through and understand. We had to challenge our understanding, clarify how our sponsor wanted to see things done. So there was a lot to work through. And then there was the cloud build out, and then there's continuous monitoring, a lot of moving pieces. But strangely, we did this on time, on budget, and it was an amazing journey. So Shulman was a tremendous 3PAO, and the team at CISA has been absolutely delightful in terms of clarity, communication, and partnership. So I don't know, for me it was it was a lot of work, but it was a dream ride. I have no complaints, no sleepless nights. It's just making sure everyone stays unblocked.
Well, Coalfire and CISA, kind of like Ty Cobb and Babe, having some pretty good batters on the bench there. It's not John Gilroy at bat, it's Ty Cobb. Oh, really? Well,
That's right.
Knows something about hitting the ball. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I can't recommend those partners highly enough.
I listen to podcasts, and one of the podcasts I listen to is Feds at the Edge. And this edge thing is a kind of a big deal in commercial companies and the federal government as well. And there's more and more people computing and doing things at the edge. And I look at it as a bigger attack surface. And so if you're used to attacking data centers, I mean, how does this whole concept of Feds at the Edge and edge computing and remote sensors, how does that fit into the whole concept of ethical hacking?
Well, the more you give us to play with, the more we get to play with, right? That's that's the thing. So the question really becomes, what is the motive? What is the outcome? And what are we trying to achieve? What I love about the bug bounty universe, the offensive security profession as it's evolving, is our outcomes are clear. I had a call earlier where we were talking about the future of CVE and what that is going to look like in time. And the North Star, if we take a step back, because technology is now buried in everything. It's in the dashboard of your car. It may be doing lane departure sensing and traffic spacing. There's autopilot. Like there's all kinds of software in absolutely every aspect of your life. Our consumers don't know how that works. And they shouldn't have to. We need to facilitate an understanding of how these things work, where they could be potentially unsafe. And we're talking about physical safety at this point due to this level of integration. And the consumer should know, one, that there was something wrong. Number two, something was done to correct it. And if at all possible, that it's been corrected. They have no action to take. And so if we're partnering on that journey, ultimately what we're trying to do is facilitate and accelerate that closed loop cycle.
In doing my homework for this interview, I was kind of surprised. I mean, I was, I look around, ask people and do searches and look at different things. And some of my researchers said that you've onboarded 40 U.S. agencies. I mean, you've been involved in lots and lots of organizations. I mean, NASA, you work with GSA and Caresoft. I mean, when I first heard your company name, I didn't realize that you were behind a lot of successful organizations. I think I was surprised. Is that what normally happens when people find out about Bugcrowd? Oh, we're doing what for how long? It's you're like this. It's all of a sudden you find out that's in a lot of different places. It's a funny company. I never realized how behind the scenes it is in so many organizations.
Yeah, look, it's a honor to partner with these organizations to drive security outcomes for them. Right? Bugcrowd was founded 14 years ago. And if you look back 14 years ago, the idea that you could pull out your phone and request a driver to the airport and someone's going to pull up in a car they own privately and will take you there. The world has changed. But 14 years ago, the idea of bug bounty as a commonplace understanding, the idea that hackers in good faith would reach out and advise and would potentially get paid. Like this is a phenomenal shift in what we're doing with technology and how we're partnering. But Bugcrowd's been around for a very long time and been partnering with amazing companies early in their journey. We've got a number of companies that are putting forward, well, let me frame this differently, CISOs, security executives that are running security programs. We're buying tools and technology that are marketed to have specific outcomes. How do you prove that really works? Generally, you have to buy it and run it. A number of companies we're working with right now are putting forward these hypotheses saying, listen, we do this. Our marketing says this. Bugcrowd tested it. Bugcrowd hammered on it. We got better, but we can certify we're actually achieving most of what we're talking about, and here's what's real. This is a really neat way to drive transparency, partnership, and a public feedback loop to address these issues.
There are some management consultants who'll say, well, if your company's been in business 10 years, it's probably going to be around another 10 years. If your company's been around for 15 years, another 15 years. So I'm going to, instead of going backward, we're going to go back to the future here. We're going to look at the next 10 years, 5 years or something. And so where do you see Bugcrowd positioning itself with concerns like supply chain risk management, AI security, and in some mission critical systems, maybe in the Pentagon? So how are you going to be positioned in the years ahead, if it's even possible to know with all this AI floating around?
Let me pull out my crystal ball. Yeah,
crystal ball, good. That's what we want.
AI is changing a lot of things, right? So first and foremost, the magic that is behind Bugcrowd is the offensive research community. And this is a global population of really great folks doing really great work. The richness of targets, I think, draws their attention. The rewards that incentivize. We pay for outcomes, not for effort. A pen test, you're paying for a unit of time for a tester. We're paying for outcomes. If they find something, then they get paid. So there's work that goes in, there's trade-offs there. So if you look forward, I feel like AI in the agentic universe is going to drive down the unit economics, the cost of what some of the syntactical-based standard injection attacks, the same way that scanners and other technologies driven those prices down. But the creativity is where we're going to find that integration. So you want machine speed with human depth. So how do we diversify that? How do we maximize value creation for the researcher, efficiency and outcomes for the buyer, and ultimately drive the missional outcomes that we're aligned on forward? And that's right where we're at, is right at that nexus. So we're going to continue iterating and continue partnering with the crowd to do that.
I don't think that artificial intelligence is going to replace creative humans, especially in this penetration testing area, because that's I think that's what no one's talking about with AI, is that, what about scaling? What about being creative? What about new situations presenting themselves? They can just go back to the old way of doing things. And so it almost has to be because the threats now are dynamic. the best way to respond is to have, a dynamic way to test your defenses. And this whole dynamic capability, I don't think can be replicated with artificial intelligence. And I think that's what some people are seeing now. I don't know if you've read some recent studies, but some people are not impressed.
It's really funny. So we go back a year ago, we were talking about how LLMs were always lying to us because they want to be helpful. What's fascinating is that's mostly gone down. It's mostly gone away, and things are getting more accurate. And so the learning curve is exponential for these systems. So they're going to provide more value over time. I think that's pretty clear and pretty simple. Following on to that, I think if we take apart the different classes of attacks, like there's a whole taxonomy or ontology of how we attack systems, the classes of vulnerabilities. Some of those vulnerability patterns are going to be very effectively and scalably tested by automation. And that's going to accelerate time to identify. And those aren't going to be the attack patterns that our human researchers are focused on anymore. That said, that same automation will be able to say, hey, there's something here, but I don't know how to do this. And we're going to drive researcher attention to those areas. And so we're going to augment the humans by giving them 1, visibility, 2, warmer target identification, and 3, for the customer, better confidence in coverage and efficiency. So I think everybody has the opportunity to win, but I don't see automation replacing the research community.
No, I don't either. That's good. It's kind of fascinating. If you're interested in more information, I guess you can go to bugcrowd.com and learn about your FedRAMP moderate certification, which is always good to know. Well, this has been interesting. I think this whole dynamic of a broker, I think of real estate brokers, and there used to be equipment brokers and all kinds of brokers out there. But you're brokering, you're like an information broker in some ways, a vulnerability broker. It's an interesting concept, isn't it?
We're brokering access to some of the brightest minds at the time you need it. It's a tremendous partnership.
Yeah, that's really good. And ROI works with this particular company. Unfortunately, Trey, we're running out of time here. You have been listening to the Fiddle Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Trey Ford, Chief Strategy and Trust Officer at Bugcrowd.